Hey, this is Paulius. You're listening to Voices of Table Rounds. Today's episode, I'm co-hosting with Christina, who's also one of the co-creators of the game. And we are going to be talking with one of our fans of Table Rounds. And his name is Vlad, who's a medical student at SUNY Downstate. So welcome to the podcast, Christina and Vlad. And for those who don't know you already, tell us a bit about yourself. So Christina, why don't you start first?
Sure. Hi, everyone. I'm Christina. If you don't already know me, I'm one of the co-creators of Table Rounds. I am 27 years old, and I do go to medical school at SUNY Downstate here in Brooklyn, New York. I'm originally from the Los Angeles area, went to school at UCLA, master's at USC, and took a couple more years off to work and do more school. So now I'm here in medical school, and I couldn't be happier.
Awesome. And Vlad, why don't you tell us a bit about yourself?
Hi, everyone. Yeah, so definitely a big fan of Table Rounds. You got that part at least right. So yeah, my name is Vlad. I also go to SUNY Downstate here in Brooklyn. Just finished my first year of medical school. So assuming that I passed all my finals, I'll be an MS2 in the next month.
Nice. Congratulations. And do you know what you want to do with your medical training, Vlad?
Uh, I'm sort of all over the place at the moment. Interventional cardiology is sort of what I'm thinking about, but I really liked gastroenterology last semester, so that jumped up a couple of places on my list. So, I'm an open book, anything that interests me, really.
Awesome. And Christina, do you know what you're thinking you want to be doing?
Yeah, I'm also still kind of searching, but actually right now I just started a research internship at Memorial Sloan Kettering doing neuroradiology and neuro-oncology research. So I'm really, really interested in cancer and more the oncology side of things. So I'm kind of leaning towards that at the moment.
Very cool. So you guys have completed your first year of med school. Congratulations. It's a huge milestone, and you did it during COVID. Do you have any reflections how COVID has impacted your medical school experience? Maybe Vlad, you can start.
Yeah, definitely. COVID has definitely impacted my education. I come from a more traditional background in the sense that I crave the physical interaction among not only among teachers but also among my peers, and especially with things like anatomy, which is I'm not a really good person that like can spatially reconstruct things in my head. I really need them in front of me. So the lack of in-person anatomy and visualizing anatomical structures really hindered, I think, my optimal performance. I think in some ways it has made learning a little bit more versatile in the sense that you're a lot of the schedule is up to you with remote learning. But overall, I would say it was a pretty big hindrance to my overall capacity of education.
Yeah, I hear you. What about you, Christina?
Yeah, just to jump onto that, Vlad and I are actually classmates. We're in the same small group. So at the very beginning of the year, we weren't able to hang out with anybody. We didn't meet any of our classmates except for we were put into groups of like 10 or 11 students, and Vlad and I happened to be in the same group. So it's kind of what happened was everybody in those small groups made really, really good friends. And only if you were lucky, you had other sets of friends that you knew from outside. But that's usually not how it happens, when you first start medical school. So we kind of had each other to go off of and to, bounce ideas off of, and some good and some bad. But yeah, I do recall Vlad always being very vocal about wanting to be in person. He even pushed for in-person lectures again, which, as most people know, not a lot of people attend anymore. But yeah, I'm in agreement as well. It's something that you just need to deal with, and we all did. I think everyone got through it in their own way, but it's no secret that we wish we could have been in person. At least for me, I knew a lot of people that had done medical school, and I've taken 5 gap years. So I was very much looking forward to starting medical school and doing it online, without the white coat ceremony, without any of that stuff that is usually happening, was a bit of a letdown, but then you just bounce back in other ways.
Yeah, Vlad, I also hear what Vlad was saying about, or what you mentioned about trying to get together in person. I mean, I think there's a lot, probably the majority of students that just really want to do remote learning so they can watch videos on 2x and like sit in their PJs and do Anki cards all day. I was not that person. And actually, the rest of the Table Rounds team, who's not here, but we were the people that always attended classes. And that's how we became friends. And that's eventually that led to us making Table Rounds, which Christina is very familiar with, as she's been, with us from the beginning. But I think the next part of the conversation will focus on Vlad and your experiences with Table Rounds. So, do you remember how you first heard about this game?
I can't remember the exact detail. I remember it obviously has something to do with Christina, like she mentioned, we're in the same group. And I think we were talking because, like, I'm really big into board and card games. I think it's a great way for friends to get together in a physical setting where technology is sort of taking control of our lives nowadays. Board games are a nice way to settle down and just interact and have fun with friends. So I'm pretty sure we were talking about that at first, and then Christina mentioned that she was one of the co-founders of this game, Table Rounds. And I immediately, even before she explained any of the rules or anything, I immediately jumped on to the idea because not only is it a card game for med students, it's a card game and it's specifically for med students. So yeah, I was immediately intrigued, and the game itself definitely did not disappoint.
Awesome. So how did your understanding of the game evolve over time? Because I think some people, I've heard a similar story where, they're just into games and they're like, hey, no matter how good or bad this game is, I'm getting it and I'm going to try it out. Um, do you want to reflect about how, you've experienced it from first, reading about the rules, then trying it out, and whether that's changed over time the more you've interacted with the game?
Sure, definitely. So, in terms of how my experiences have evolved, I had the privilege of being in class with one of with one of the creators of the game. So I had a sort of behind the scenes view of how the rules work, and I think what's really clever is the QR code. I'm kind of surprised many other games aren't following suit, where you scan the QR code and you can update the rules, and there's new modes that you can play. I think it's an extremely clever idea. Uh, in terms of how it evolved, it's a little bit tricky for me to answer because we were in med school during a pandemic, and it is a physical game. Unfortunately, I haven't played this game nearly as much as I would have liked to. That being said, I think what really interested me is how you really have to. I kind of thought initially it would be more of like a strict knowledge. Like, do you just strictly know this medical information? But what I found interesting is it's sort of like you have to think really outside the box and take two diagnoses or two, like a diagnostic test and a condition that you would have never really thought about together and really make that connection. I think is what makes this game so brilliant, that you really have to really stretch your medical knowledge juices to get this game working.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we kind of joke about it directing us towards low yield resources because you just try to find either obscure case reports or other things that you otherwise wouldn't stumble upon when you're trying to connect two concepts that are usually not mentioned in the same sentence. But through that process, you end up thinking through the most common things, the hoofbeats being the horses, but then you also get to discover a lot of the zebras and explore some of the other more interesting things. So I completely agree with you that intellectually it's very, very stimulating in endless capacity, really. The whole experience is really limited by your creativity and your imagination. Which setting have you used this game in? I know we're in, kind of pandemic mode still, somewhat, and who have you played it with so far, and anything you want to share with us that somebody else might find interesting?
Sure, definitely. I actually have a couple of interesting stories about that. So, for the most part, I've played this with my fellow downstate peers. Brought this out at my birthday. It was a group of like 10 or 11 med students, and we all had a blast playing it. That was a really fun game, and we've played it like here and there in like small park gatherings. I think a particularly interesting game that I had was with my mom, who for the uninitiated, she is a nurse, and she is also the complete opposite of me in the sense that she hates games. It doesn't matter how hard the rules are, how simple the rules are. She just will not stand games at all. And so when like 3 or 2 months ago, she tore basically all her ligaments in her left foot. She was home. She was bedridden. She had nowhere to go. So when I came with this game, she had nowhere to run to, and she reluctantly agreed to play. However, to my surprise, and more than likely her surprise, she ended up loving the game so much so that we ended up playing 3 games after. And she asked if she could bring a copy to work to play with her other nurses at work, which to me blew my mind considering how much she absolutely cannot stand games. So that's a testament to how amazing this game is for the medically initiated. And I'm slated to play this game on Monday with one of my other med school friends who doesn't go to SUNY Downstate. So hopefully that game goes really great as well.
Wow, that's fascinating to hear.
Which school, if you don't mind me asking, does this person go to?
He goes to New York College of Podiatric Medicine.
Oh, very cool. Mm-hmm. Yeah, you gotta let us know how that goes.
Definitely. Hopefully that game goes through. Now, plans are a little bit, iffy nowadays, but yeah.
I hear you. So, you know how you mentioned we have different gameplays for the game, because really this is a card deck that we've honed over time to represent the foundation, really the foundations of clinical medicine, and just the way that you can use a regular card deck to play solitaire or poker or whatever. It's the same cards, but you apply different rules to it. And most people, just kind of follow along the gameplays that we've suggested. Have you modified them in your own way, or have you created other ways to play that maybe others haven't explored yet?
That's a great question. I am it's sort of in my personality to be sort of like a purist, like a rules purist. I typically don't play with house rules or homebrews of any kind, so I haven't tinkered around quite yet. I think the more I get the opportunity to play this game, maybe I'll come up with maybe creative ways to play. But as of right now, the modes available are more than sufficient for me.
Yeah, I want to jump in really quick. I do remember one time we were on the rooftop and we were playing with like a group of 9 or 10, and instead of like everyone going at a time, which we did, but it ended up being that like we all just kind of went at the same time, and we just expanded the board so much in like 5 minutes, and everyone was talking, everyone was trying to like, argue with each other or say, oh, does this one go there? Can you reach over and put that one over there? So we did kind of do a very collaborative game towards the end there when we were kind of like running low on our cards, and individually we couldn't think of anything else really. But I thought that was really fun.
That is creative. Completely agree. So Vlad, what do you think? What do you see the potential of table rounds in the medical education space?
I think table rounds holds an invaluable, in my opinion, place in medical education, because a lot of the times, studying all this information, it's a grinding task. There's a lot of just rote memorization that students have to go to, and sometimes, especially preclinical, when you're doing like theory, it's really easy to get lost in the woods of like, why are you even doing this to begin with? Because this is also seemingly far removed from what we're going to need when we're seeing patients or performing clinical procedures. So first of all, there's obviously the fun factor of bringing fun back into studying and progressing your clinical education. Not to mention, it definitely helps build lasting connections. Like just for one example, I remember what game this was, but somebody connected scleroderma and GERD. Which is a connection I'll never forget, because I knew scleroderma caused esophageal dysmotility, but I never made the connection that in itself can also later on cause GERD. And that game has helped me sort of make that connection that I probably would have never otherwise made. And it also helps with straight memorization. So like I will never forget that protease inhibitors can sometimes cause glucose intolerance. I will never forget that now. So I definitely think that this game holds an invaluable place in education. Ironically enough, particularly before finals, I think. Maybe I know this seems sort of out of place. I tried to get a game going before finals, but everybody was like calling me insane for even offering it. But I think that holds merit, because it's a way of, you get cards specifically devoted to the material you're learning, and you just talk about things. It's a lot. I think it's a nice break from just doing nonstop question banks and Anki cards.
Very true. I completely agree with what you're saying. I do think that people get very amped up and stressed out and anxious in the days leading up to a big exam. But ultimately, I think this game allows you to solidify the knowledge and kind of really think outside of the usual study guide outline, whatnot, because that's what the exam tries to do. It gives you all these clues from different body systems and, labs and diagnoses and treatments, and you're supposed to piece it together. So I completely agree. I think that it's not the traditional way to approach exam days or, leading up to it, but I like what you've done with it.
Thank you.
So let's talk a bit about your experience in learning medicine. Maybe a tough question to answer, but what do you think has been the most memorable advice you've received as a medical student so far, either from your peer or from a professor?
I'll take this one first. So this piece of advice came to me in undergrad, but it's resonated with me so much that I still kept it to today. And he eventually went on to become a medical student too. But I was speaking with a friend, and he said, Christina, it was like a really long day of like extracurriculars and classes. And he said to me, Christina, every meeting is an interview. And I thought about that. I'm like, well, what do you mean? He's like, well, if you just, even text a professor or go to their office hours, it's not simply a meeting. They're, really evaluating you and, your skill set as a future doctor and, as a future medical professional. So basically what he was trying to say about that is like, don't miss out on any opportunities because you never know where those opportunities are going to come from. And that's been so true in my 1 year of medical school education. You're just going to have, opportunities coming at you left and right. And you have to, number one, realize that they are opportunities. It's not just like another meeting. You can turn this into something truly great. And you have to hold on to that and see where that will take you and eventually establish relationships with other people down the line. So if that piece of advice can be summed up into one phrase, it's every meeting is an interview.
Really awesome, Christina. Thanks for sharing that. Tough fact to follow, Vlad. You don't have to be as profound, but just anything that personally stuck out in your memory.
Yeah, Christina as always sets the bar really high, so anybody going next just doesn't have a chance. But I'll go ahead anyway after 100% agreeing with what she said. Yeah. So I've heard this advice 100 times in med school. The thing I'm about to say, and it can sort of mean, I think, whatever you want it to mean. But the advice I'm referring to specifically is it's a marathon, not a race. I've heard that said to me like 100 different times, and I didn't really know. Like I had a general idea of what it meant, but I think I only realize it now. And there's so much depth rather in medical school and education that you can really get lost in the details. And especially for preclinicals, I think this is way more valuable. It focus on the long road ahead and not worry about every detail as you're studying it, because you can go into a rabbit hole of like exactly how protein signaling works, but that's not going to help you in the long run when you're going to need to understand maybe how diseases and pathologies form. It may help, but just know enough to understand what's happening. Don't go beyond that, because it's easy to get lost in the woods.
Great. Yeah, wise words. Absolutely. I've definitely heard that before. And hearing this makes me think of the pancake advice or analogy that some of my professors have given me, is that, it's like if every day you're asked to eat, 3 pancakes or whatever, and that is supposed to, make you think of how much you're supposed to study. Then if you skip a day, then the next day you have to eat 6 pancakes, and that's much more difficult to do. And if you skip 2 days, then, and it's not to say that you cannot skip days and take a break, but that's just the idea of the marathon, of kind of going in for the long haul. So you guys have finished your first year of med school, and there probably will be some of our audience who are pre-medical and are thinking about going to school or have gotten into school and are anxious about it. Do you have any tips from your personal experience that you might share with somebody who's in that position?
Yeah, I have pretty practical advice. I really enjoy mentoring pre-med students and just talking with them about my experience. And so, one piece of very practical advice that I always give is, and it's pretty difficult actually if you think about it, but it's always check your emails. Like, stay on top of them. I know they tend to pile up, especially once you get into medical school. It's like they're never ending. But maybe for every 15 or 20 emails that you won't need to see, one of them is going to have something, that you would want to see, something, an opportunity, something that nobody else would see, a scholarship, an opportunity to, apply for something that you think is really cool. And it turns out that a lot of medical students don't keep up with their emails. So if you just do that one thing, you're kind of ahead of the game. And that's certainly helped me get to where I am today and doing all the extracurriculars that I never thought I'd be able to do, where I just, oh, this person sent me an email. Let's just reply to them. And they say, oh, people in medical school are very happy to talk to you about anything, basically. So that would be my one piece of advice. If you're pre-med or just starting at medical school, you're about to start, check your emails.
Nice. What about you, Vlad? Anything to offer?
That was very simple but very important advice. So advice that I should probably actually take more often. I do have a little piece of nuggets of wisdom, I suppose. It may not seem like it's going to be valuable until you start, and I wish somebody really hammered this into me. Is there's a lot of resources, so many that you seem like inundated with them. Choose one good one and stick with it, because there's especially these past couple of semesters for me, I felt a little bit of FOMO, like I was sticking with one resource, but then somebody put up another one and another one, and I didn't know which one was better, so I started comparing, and you lose more time that way. Stick with one good resource for one particular subject, and you should be good. There's always going to be another source that you think is going to include more information, but generally, I'd say don't worry too much about that.
I will say that that is also true for residency too. I feel like you have an even more abundant pool of resources to learn from and, reference and so on. And I think, if you develop the habits now and you stick to the things that you like and they talk to you the way that you think, completely agree. I think you should continue doing that after medical school. So since we're talking a bit about resources, do you feel that you can recommend any particular tools that have been helpful in your study routine in medical school that somebody else might also find helpful?
I'll answer this in somewhat of a cliche question, but it is definitely true. The most valuable resource that I've learned or that I've used in medical school has definitely been my friends, my peers. We will get together on a weekly basis, sometimes twice a week, and just answer questions on Zoom. And sometimes even just that is so helpful because everybody is coming with it from a different source of like resources. Like we were saying, this person used Anki. By the way, I'm not an Anki person. I do not use Anki, full disclosure. But this person uses Pathoma. This person uses, B&B or whatever. And everyone coming from a different perspective can come together and get an answer right from all different ways. And I think that's invaluable because not only are you learning from other people, but you're also learning how to talk through your answer, how to explain yourself. And that only makes your learning path even clearer. So I honestly don't think I could have gotten through this year without doing questions with other people. And we were, of course, mostly online. So we just did it on Zoom and it worked actually very well. We shared a screen and we had a good time. Learned a lot.
I'd like to piggyback on that like 3 times. That is absolutely invaluable advice. Like I cannot emphasize enough how important that is, because that kind of solves the problem that I was talking about before, where there's so many resources. And let's say I use Boards and Beyond, and Christina uses Pathoma. We don't both need to watch it now. We can just sort of give information that we may have missed during and apply that to an actual clinical question. So yeah, absolutely. If I could say one thing, I would say in terms of resources, Amboss. 100%. I do use Anki, not religiously, but I do use it. Amboss with Anki becomes it helps Anki become not just a tool for memorization, but also actually learning, which I think makes great because Anki, it's really easy to get like into the habit of clicking spacebar just like a zombie, and it's almost becomes not memorization at that point. So Amboss really makes Anki that, like, it makes it twofold better for actually studying. And the questions themselves are super. So Amboss all the way.
Really cool. Well, it's been really nice to talk to you both. And do you have any final words that you want to sum up our conversation? Any takeaways that you have?
I'd say I guess so. I guess circling back to table rounds, because I do genuinely believe it's such a brilliantly designed game. I think use the strength in terms of like play table rounds with, not just, if you can, set up an environment where you're playing with people with different medical backgrounds. So maybe not just med students or not just residents, but a med student, a PA, a nurse, a resident. I think every sort of background from medicine has their own sort of strength in terms of what they bring to the table, no pun intended, or somewhat intended, to the table. So they can offer their bits of wisdom, and you can make connections that you wouldn't have never thought of, but they have, because they've seen that in their field. So play it with a varied group of people. I think that would be interesting.
It's a great way to finish it off, Vlad. I couldn't agree more. Also, one last point that I'll say, just because, I am one of the co-founders of Table Rounds. I'm really, really hoping we can implement it even more now that we're going back in person in the fall. I'm going to work really hard to try to, talk to some of our administrators and our professors and see, we can get the ball rolling on in-person, events again. And the people that I have talked to seem very, very excited about helping us out in our goal. So I really hope to play a lot more table rounds and expose a lot more downstate students to this great game.
Great points. I like what both of you said. And Vlad, to your point, I think what you're describing is what reflects the real world practice of medicine, is that it's a team sport, that you cannot, no matter how much of a cowboy of a doctor you would want to be, you need nurses to help you room the patient and do their vitals and labs, and then you need PT to get them moving. It's really, like a team effort, and completely agree with playing with as many people from different backgrounds will only enrich your experience. Well, thank you all for sharing your time with us, and we'll see everybody on social media, and check out our Twitter challenges. You can participate asynchronously and online without purchasing the game, but obviously go to playtablerounds.com to get your own copy and introduce it to your friends, and that might be another way to make more friends.